this is obviously a little different, but whenever I see a friend and we go for a walk, comes over to my house or whatever it is, he's leaving, I dap him up, see you later. I always go like, yo, what are you saying next week? Like, what are we doing? Like, I always lead the end to like, what are we doing next? Like, why not do that with a client without obviously being silly and pushy? Mose, can you explain to me why you're in a closet right now?
Well, I mean, it's a long story. My parents bought another house 2 years ago, but the basement to that house wasn't finished. And so they're in the middle of that.
And he's decided to record the podcast in a closet with all the clothes back there. I think I see a Letterman jacket. I think that's what that is. I don't know whose that is, but maybe you could rock it one day.
So you can either buy Vogue and figure out what you're going to wear in 2022, or you could just look behind there and then steal my style. So this one's for free. Next one I'm going to charge you. But I'm pretty excited. So backstory on today's pod, we're actually going to record this yesterday, but one of us was too hungover to record, and it wasn't me this time.
That's not the case. The case was, I'm like, okay, we can do it. And as I'm walking home from my girlfriend's place, we're on the phone, and he's like, yeah, just a couple issues with the pod. We got construction workers over at the house, and my parents are gone, so they can't watch the dog. And I'm like, well, we planned this like yesterday, so like I don't know how. Is this just news? Like I feel like this
just got flipped on me.
I feel like that's something you knew, like would have known if you asked questions to, you know.
Yeah, if I took any interest in my parents' social lives, that it would have come up.
Yeah.
But, I just assumed it was another morning of reading the newspaper and staying inside. So my bad. Sorry, Mom and Dad, but you proved me wrong.
Well, I think this episode a little different because when we were talking about what we're going to do today, Mose is pretty much flipping, I think I'm going to be the guest this episode from what he's telling me he wants to talk about. So Mose, why don't you take this away, man? I feel like you have a bunch of questions for me.
I do. You've been doing work, which not everyone can say. You've been doing a lot of freelance work. So I wanted to get into the relationship that you have with your clients. And more specifically, I want to know what you've worked, how long have you been freelancing?
2017. So like just about
three-ish years and change.
Like a little over 3.
And in those 3 years, going from complete noob doing this to where you are now, I want to know what comes up consistently as like the one thing that your clients misunderstand about what you do. Because I feel like there's a stereotype with creative work where like most of the time, number one, the creative isn't going to do a great job of explaining what they do. And then on the other side, the client doesn't really know. It's like kind of a black box process of like you go into this editing suite or your laptop and then you come out with this video. But there's a lot that goes on between when you start a project and when you finish. So the question is like, what do clients misunderstand about what you do?
I think the biggest thing they misunderstand is how much time goes into editing. I think the shooting they kind of get because we're at a place where everyone's shooting on their phone. Like they kind of like have a sense of what it's like to take pictures. Whereas before, it's a bit more rare to be someone who knows how to like compose and take a shot or just film things. But the biggest thing is like in the editing suite, the amount of changes some people ask and they don't realize like, oh, I have to like reformat everything. Like they want a new song.
Can you change that music track and then just export it and we'll be fine?
That's happened a few times where I'm like, okay, so you understand that now I have to like re-edit the video to fit this song. And I think so they don't understand the editing time, but they also don't understand like why things cost so much. Because if you're someone who's like smart and understands how to charge properly, you have to realize that as a videographer or photographer, your lens, your camera, all these things cost money and depreciate in value over time. So you have to be charging like accordingly. So if you look at like VizTech, which is a local camera shop, they rent out my camera, the GH5, for $150 a day. So why wouldn't you, as someone who bought the camera, it was $2,500 when I bought it, you should be charging accordingly, whether it's like half that price of VizTech or the full price, whatever it is, like you should be charging for your gear for your editing software you're paying for. Like all these things cost a lot of money to just like get into the business that you have to charge for it. And I don't think clients really get it. So sometimes I have to explain to them, it's like, this is like a car, like a camera, like that's $2,500, or you go higher, like a $5,000 camera. Once you like start shooting with it and getting scratches on it and stuff, people are going to pay you like half the price in like a year, you know? Like GH5s on like Kijiji after I've had it for 2 years are like $1,500 now. Super cheap. $1,000 off. So yeah, I think it's just understanding pricing and speed, you know? Like that's the hardest thing to like articulate properly. Actually, on top of that, I'm going to keep going. They don't like, it's very hard for them to understand your ideas. That's the hardest thing, is like I have this creative idea, but I don't know how to explain to you in words or in writing. And you pretty much have to wait for the day of the shoot to like really show it, you know, depending on the scale of your production. And I think that's something you deal with too. You have ideas and like you're telling me them, and I go, let's just see it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Now, I think we've talked about this guy before. He runs an Instagram account and a Twitter account, and he started selling online courses about a month ago. No, less than that, or probably more. Cut that. The guy's name's Visualize Value, and he does a great job of explaining how, like, and it clicked for me yesterday when I was watching one of his videos, like, as creative people, for me, for example, like I think my greatest skill is probably turning ideas into visual ideas and being able to like show what an idea looks like through images. But we take that skill that like makes a lot of sense when you're doing it for marketing or doing it for a client, and then we go on these client meetings and we just don't bring out the skill. Like we forget we have it. And so what I want to get to here is that, like, I'm sure there's plenty of times where you could be able to like ask somebody like me, or, you know, a bunch of design people, to be like, okay, I have this like intangible concept that I have a ton of difficulty explaining when I'm just trying to use words. Like the example of, I think from doing the podcast, one of the things I've learned is that creating content and like growing an account, most of the times when a client gets you on the phone and says, I want to do this video, it's not because they think that you're this sick person that can make this super creative thing, right? Like the creative is there for a reason. It's trying to push towards like growing an account or getting new sales, or, you know, whatever it might be. And I think there's plenty of times where it's like you could use a visual or a keynote or a deck to explain this intangible concept in your head. And this is something that I've done incredibly poorly, to get that idea into a visual form so that people can understand what you're saying. Because I do feel that a ton of the time where I'm like, I'm trying to explain this concept, I'm trying to explain why it would work with words, and it just falls apart. So how much do you think, like, you don't do any like keynotes, you don't do any like proposals with clients, it's all over the phone, correct?
All over the phone and email, but that's also because it's the scale of my production, and I'm not working with these like huge budgets, you know? I don't even think it's worth our time to go through this issue, or to go through me articulating through images and words in like some sort of keynote. I don't think it's worth our time.
It's extra work.
It is extra work that I would have to charge for.
And you're only charging what, like 25? Like if it's a great project, you might be charging like 4K, 25.
Yeah.
This is not Corona. Like Corona's different with the freelance market.
Yeah.
But, like real everything's open. You're charging anywhere between like 2,500 to 4K for a project.
For like a big project. That's a pretty big project. Usually it's maybe like 1,000 to 2,000, something like that, for like a regular project. And it's like, that's just a waste of our time to come up with a proposal, because a lot of these people are wearing, like, a lot of clients I work with who are small business owners, they wear a shitload of hats. Like they're like busy. They're like, I'm hiring you because I like your stuff. I like you. Make it work for me. I don't want to be like stressed to try and figure out like what you're going to give me, you know? So it's not even worth it for us in those, because there's not much risk. I feel like in a project where there's a high potential of failure if we don't get our idea perfect, because, you know, we only have 3 hours on this one set with this amount of budget, and these people we hired who are only going to be here for 3 hours, and if like they're here for longer, it's going to be like double their wage. Like there's all these things where it's like, let's just get our idea crystal clear between the client and the producer of the content. That makes sense, but for my scale, it doesn't make sense at all. But I found that like a lot of clients, they just trust me. They're like, okay, you're the video
Where
guy.
do you think that trust comes from? Is it there the first call?
Maybe
Or is
naivete.
it like
I don't know.
naivete?
I'm not sure.
Well, I think some of it comes from like the social proof of that, like you have a bunch of work out there online, and that's like the first step into the funnel for you. Where it's
they're like,
if
it
I'm a
looks
business
good.
owner, I know that Will can deliver on the result that I'm asking for, which is like a series of 5 videos. Like I know he can do that because I've seen a bunch of his work.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been very lucky. Like this whole like career I've had is like the luckiest thing at times because I've never had to go find clients. They've all just found me to the point where like it just like snowballed. I've never had clients really be a huge pain in the ass. Never had clients that don't pay me. I've never had clients who like try to manhandle and overanalyze and micromanage the work. They're all just like, you go. I trust you, you know? Even if it's not that good of a video, they go, it's great. Like I've never had those moments where like they're like, this is dog shit, like redo it, you know? Which I think I've heard a lot of people say. I've heard a lot of people tell me about these nightmare clients. And I'm like, shit, I'm very fucking lucky.
Okay, so back to, we started this conversation by talking about how one of the big things that clients don't understand is that you have all this expensive gear and that you have to budget the cost of your gear into maintaining your gear, into buying new gear, into the cost of the project that you're charging them for. Earlier this pandemic, you kind of played around with the idea of getting a new camera, more expensive camera. For a situation like that, let's kind of suspend reality again and say that things are kind of back to normal and clients have budgets that you would usually charge them. Is this a situation where I know that I want to get a new camera in 3 to 6 months? Would you start charging for that new camera in the client work that you're doing now? Is that something that you'd think about doing?
Honestly, it's just everything's different because of coronavirus.
That's why I said suspend reality, because this is kind of like la la land right now, because those budgets don't really exist with
So forget
Corona.
COVID in a real world. Let's just get into like a controlled situation.
Mm-hmm.
I would change it with new clients, but I probably wouldn't change much with
Okay.
existing because like they're.
And why wouldn't you
used
change
to-
with existing? I think I know the answer, but I think it would be valuable for you to explain that.
Because we've already established like a precedent, and I think once it gets to a point where like I don't need to do this work, or I literally feel, or not literally, I always say literally, if I feel like this is like I'm losing money and and I'm just really not working for my worth, and I could be doing better and bigger things, I will start charging more. But if I've established some sort of precedent and trust with the client, it's kind of bad business to flip the switch on them. Like, I mean, I can't even remember.
Put you in a tough situation. Let's put you in a tough situation. Let's say that and I don't know if this has happened or I would doubt that this has happened to you, but let's say that you are in a client relationship where you enjoy doing the work, like it was a sport or something, or it was like a high profile athlete, and you're like, this is sick, like I'm just gonna jump on this opportunity. And then you do a couple videos for them, and then you realize that like, wait, I'm not charging them enough because like they're getting so much value out of this work. And you make the decision that you're like, I want to start charging this existing client more than I'm charging right now. I don't think that you've been in this situation, but let's pretend that you have. Like, how would you go about approaching that conversation with the client?
The issue with creatives is that they're very emotional. And in business, you can't be very emotional. It has to all be just like numbers, notes, like what is like the truth. And if you're already an emotional person, which most people who are creative are, and if you're a creative person freelancing, you have to do business, it's probably going to be extra hard for you, and you like put too much like emotion into it, where it should just be like compliments. Say it's been a really good time working with you for the last couple months. Then you say, but over time, I've just felt like my value has increased, and I would like to continue working with you because it's been so amazing again. So it's like this compliment sandwich. And then you say, this would be my new rate for you guys. Understand if that's not possible for you. And to make it even better, to show that you have their interest in your mind, is you say, if this is something out of your price range, I have XXX people who do it for this rate, who would be fantastic. I trust them greatly. They would do a killer job for you. I think you're probably going to get the gig with them if it's not crazy out of their budget, just off the fact that like you appreciate them while being honest. And while being honest, you finish off with, here's some references for if you can't afford me, because I just want you to get video at a good price with good people that I'm crediting as someone who you can trust. Like that's like the ultimate. It's kind of like when you quit a job. I was saying this to a friend. If you quit a job, you explain what you loved about the job, but what you don't, and that's why you quit. And then say, I know you're gonna have a vacancy in your position, but I have like a list of people here I found on Indeed, or I have these 4 people I know who are similar. They could probably fit my space in the interim, or you could actually hire them and save the time of, because a boss is stressed. You lose a person in your office, you're like scrambling, like how do I get someone to fulfill this need? Usually have someone
Let's also
overextend.
assume that you've been doing like a good job. Like you're not just a complete schmuck.
True. We're assuming someone's quitting to move up in the field or whatever.
You're not quitting because you want to go on a vacation to the Bahamas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think having that difficult conversation to get back to your question is like, you just have to be like complimentary yet honest, and then give them like more. It's like, this is all optional, but I think it's important. You just give them more than what they're expecting, and they're just going to feel good. Like, oh, this guy cares about me. He's offering new people or a different people to do the same job he did. Just to help me out.
Summarize quickly, I think what you're speaking to is managing the relationship and not just the work. And I think the trap that you were kind of providing context to in the beginning is that so often creative people just focus on the work, where it's like, if you can manage the relationship and like be honest with that person and kind of provide value on the way out, like it's just going to lead to a much better outcome.
I want to flip it on you because I don't think you're very good with like client relations just yet. I think when we have conversations about my issues, like you're super helpful and very knowledgeable. I'm like, damn, this is great. But in practice,
trying to learn.
In practice, you're trying to learn. You haven't had as many reps. Like I've had my fuck ups where I'm like, oop, never doing that again. You know what I mean?
Well,
like,
whoops.
You can like feel your stomach drop when you said that one thing to your client and you realize that you just screwed yourself out of the job, or like screwed yourself out of more money.
Yeah.
Or doing what your idea was. You just like accidentally like conceded and let them pick their idea, which sucks. What is it that messes you up about doing with client relations? Like I don't think from what I notice, it's like the planning of what our relationship is going to look like over the next couple months of us doing the work, and what the payment is going to be and why it's going to be that. That's what I see as something you're not the strongest at right now, but that's just a rep thing, and being fearless. So you got to be fucking like chest up and just say what you want. That's hard.
Yeah. We got the alpha fucking mentor here. Follow him on Instagram, entrepreneur advice. Anyway, sorry. I think to what you said earlier, like, I don't know if I even had like, experience freelancing, because I was like doing, like, I left my job at TSN in the summer of my 3rd year, and I came back to school, and then there's practicum and all that. So there's balancing those two. But I mean, to your point, part of it's that I just don't have a lot of reps. And the other part of it is that, like, I think we've talked about this before. I definitely wear my heart on my sleeve with some of the creative work, and sometimes there is too much attachment there where I'm like, I care way too much about this idea, when in reality, like, this piece of work is in service of their goals and not mine, and not like creative expression, or however you want to square that away. And so I think there is times where I've been too attached, and I'm like, and it's part of the reason why, like, I consume so much of the future, or like talking about these things to you. I think we had a great conversation that I kind of want to steer this towards, where you can get, so going back to the situation where you are working with a client, and you're like, I'm not capturing enough value from what I'm creating. Like, the work that I'm doing is just, it's doing great things for them, but maybe I'm not charging enough for it. There are ways to get value out of that client outside of pure money or just monetary gain. Like, and we talked about this before. I think just to start this off, some of the examples that we were thinking of is, like, if you are interested in the line of work that this client's doing, like, I'm sure that they probably have 2 or 3 people that they know that they could refer you to. And that's something that you'd have to bring up in conversation. Or like, I think exposure gets a bad rap in this thing, because a lot of in this industry, because a lot of times exposure just means free work. But there's an upside to exposure where if this person or this company has a big following, they could expose you to the right people, and that could lead to client work in the future.
Literally.
And these are all kind of things that I've been throwing around in my head when the money conversation comes up and you're working with a client that doesn't have the biggest budget. And I think it's particularly important in the context that we live in now, because like the reality is that for these small businesses where you as a creative plug into their business, you're kind of like that final layer of marketing, whereas like they don't have the budget for you if they don't have customers walking through the door. And like the sad reality of social distancing and all these protocols that come down from government, whether you're in the States or in Canada, is that like it makes it really hard for these businesses to thrive. And then as a second order effect, right, like that's just going to impact the creative that's coming out of them because the marketing budget isn't that big. So if you're in that situation where like the budget isn't there to what you would love to charge them, if you're like what are the other things that you might be asking a client for compensation, I guess?
I've never been in that situation. Like it's either I do the job. This is all hypothetical, and I'm literally just gonna be ripping Christo because this guy's a genius. All credit to him.
Well, I have to be honest because the first question that I asked you was because I was watching a video with Ben Burns, another person who works at the Future, the other day, and Chris is telling the story about how Ben had to. He went to. I think Ben was charging something like $1,000 or $2,500 for a logo, which is a pretty good rate. And Chris said, "Ben, I think that you can charge anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 for a logo." And Ben said, "Chris, I think you're crazy." And then Chris said, "Ben, here's what you have to do. You're gonna call all of your existing clients, and you're gonna frame it." I think he said something similar to what you said, like, don't frame it as like you have to pay me $10,000 or I'm gone. He was probably very complimentary, probably tried to manage the relationship. But at the end, his ask was, "Listen, my rate is now $5,000 for a logo. I understand if you can't pay that or if you can't afford to pay me that, but that's my rate now." And what ended up happening is that Ben, he had like 20 clients or something like this is just to simplify. He had 20 clients and 19 of them left him. 19 said, "I can't pay the 5,000." And then it was this process of like, okay, it sucked to rip off the Band-Aid, but if those clients were never going to pay you what you're asking for now, the job becomes finding the $5,000 clients. And he's done quite well. Like I think a year later, he was charging $50,000 for a logo. But that was an aside. What were you going to say?
I don't even remember. That's just such a crazy story. Like I want to dig into that. Like,
yeah, this guy lost all of his clients. Like he had a bunch of clients. He said, "My rate's going up," and then see ya.
Oh,
clients
that would
jump
just
ship.
Rip your heart away. Like because you probably are stressing. Like I need to find people right now.
Yeah.
But where did they ever dig into where they found the 5,000?
I'm gonna have to find the video. Honestly, they didn't in that video, but it was one of those Future videos where it came out of a longer talk. So I'm sure there's a video out there that goes into detail.
Right. Well, so this is pretty much from the Christo University
School of Thought.
You got to figure out like what does the person provide. So if it's a workout gym, you know what you could probably do is say, okay, fine, you can't pay me $2,000 to do this video. How about you pay me $1,000, which is what, let's just say like you're saying I want 2,000 and the client's like I can only do 1,000. You say, how about this? Why don't we do $1,000 like what you're saying, but how much does it cost for you to personally train someone? And they're like $100 an hour. And then you say, okay, so why don't we go $1,000 for the video? On top of that, I want to have 10 personal training sessions with you or one of your trainers as the other remaining $1,000. So you're kind of bartering and you're trading some sort of service. And that's not something you have to use for yourself. You could also give that as a gift to someone. Like what if you have a loved one who
friend
wanted
that put
to
on
work
the
out?
Christmas 15? They were snacking on too many cookies.
The COVID Christmas 30? That one? But give it to them. Another way to do it is saying like, okay, so what's your goal with this video? Oh, it's to get clients and stuff. Okay, so why don't we say I do the video for free or I do it for a crazy discount and we're going to then negotiate a percentage of potential revenue from each client that comes in after the video.
Mm-hmm. That's scary, but I mean, that's a huge play of your video. I just think in that situation, there's so many things that you're not in charge of, whether it's like their marketing page, their website, their like marketing funnel, where it's like there's a million things that could go wrong that you're not in control of that could influence it. But on the other side, I think there's a great quote. I'm not going to get it perfectly right, but it's like the person who assumes more risk in the relationship, whether it's the client or the creative person, stands to gain the most. So if you make this video and it goes off like they get 20 new signups, like that's a situation where you stand to gain a lot. To your point, it's kind of one of those things where you have to balance the risk versus reward.
Right. And just know when to walk. Like don't.
Yeah.
It's like you can't sell yourself short. Like there's some gigs and stuff where I had a price that I wanted, and I kind of wanted to do the job. It seemed like something would be fun, but I thought I wanted to stay with my rate, and I've lost it, and someone else did it. It burns a bit, but you just at the end of the day, you know it's the right burn. Like it's the thing about life. Like you kind of have to like. You're gonna have to live with being burnt and having the pain, but it's like, how do you manage it while in it? Because it's inevitable. You can't avoid pain the whole way through. So it's like, better start early than late. You don't want to be 3 years in a videography career and then being tough on like your money. You kind of want to get in there as early as possible, which is what I did, and it's paid off.
And I think it's also important. I don't know if many people know this about you, but when you were just getting into videography, like expensive gear, you kind of have this big upfront cost to start. You weren't one of those people that just bought the camera, got into some debt, and then tried to figure it out from there. Like you were very intentional about taking on part-time work as you were starting and before to save up some money. And then you kind of, as your videography business scaled, you eventually got to the point where you had saved enough money that you didn't have to have the part-time job anymore, which is something that I've been thinking a lot about. It's like you can support your creative endeavors with other stuff and other ways to make money without like sullying or ruining this creative career, because you're like, I need to make money with these clients. I'm willing to take a lesser rate. I'm willing to get below market value for what I'm worth because I put myself into a situation where there's like no other options. Whereas I think like within this like hustle culture that we live in, there is this idea that like you should be burning your bridges and like making this thing that you're doing, whether it's starting a business or being like a service provider as a creator. This is the only thing that you should be doing and you shouldn't think of anything else. But I almost like the approach that you took because I think it's really smart. I don't think there was, I don't know because I wasn't with you when you started doing video, but I don't think there was a point where you're like, if this doesn't work, like I've bet the house and like there's no other option for me.
Yeah, no, definitely not. I was working at a nightclub.
You can't laugh like that before you say it. You sound like such a dirtbag. I was working at Citizen.
It's so funny because no one looks at me and is like, worked at Citizen. You know what I mean? Like
they think that you worked at the summer camp.
Yeah, I was a pool boy or some shit. But
yeah,
I was working at this nightclub in Toronto. I do jiu-jitsu, and like, a couple of guys who do jiu-jitsu work there and still do. And like everyone there is kind of has their side gig. This is like they make like, you know, $1,000 a week working like 4 nights, 3 nights a week. And then they do their own thing that they love outside of it. Like a lot of people there do that, whether it's school or whatever. So like I was kind of doing that. So I was working like once or twice a week, making like great money for like early university. So I was just like saving there. Anytime I was there, I was just like working hard and thinking.
Was this
like,
first and second year? First year.
Second and third year. Second and third year. And yeah, I was just like save money and like put this towards the video thing. Like I really want this video thing to make it so I can never work one of these jobs again. But I stuck with it for as long as I could before I was like, okay, this is like way too much. Like I'm out. And I just saved a lot through there. But I think it's important to do those jobs. Like this is kind of like a side note, I think, from what you're saying. But I hear there's like some people we know who are like, I don't want to go back to working like a shitty job. But you never really put in the time to the point where you're doing both a shit job and what you love for long enough where I think you appreciate what you love to a degree that makes you never like quit or go back or take a break. And that's like to the point I got where I worked this job that was bad. I really didn't like it. And it made me appreciate what I was going for with the video thing tenfold. Whereas if I just kind of like, you know, fucked off and just was only doing the video thing, I don't think I would have had the same speed and rise and the same gratitude and appreciation for like what this is. Like I'm very lucky, and I know I'm very lucky, and I work
And
really
you're
hard
saying
for
that
it.
that became that, like, you had that feeling and that gratitude because there was a contrast between the two.
Yes.
Where like you got onto a, what time did you start? Because it's
10
like,
p.m.
when I worked at TSN, it was the 6 p.m. start, and I would get a coffee and then get on Queen Station in Toronto and then commute for an hour and a half.
Dude.
Just be zipping when I got there, and they'd say, "Hey, we need a graphic in 10 minutes. You got it?"
For me, it was like, I get there at 9:30, 10, and then you just start
At night.
cleaning things. I was cleaning up puke. I was mainly like the bitch boy, so I was like cleaning up like the dishes and stuff. And the amount of times I cut my hand with broken glass, countless. One of
Great
the
feeling.
worst stories was like, I remember bringing ice to a table, and I show up, and then all I see is a guy in like the back of like their booth / like couch area. Like he just like falls over and like is leaning over the side of the couch. I'm like, what's going on?
This guy's had a couple.
And I go over, and I'm not kidding. On the ground, there was about like 4 mounds of puke. Like mountains. Like it wasn't just like that water spray. It was like
Chunky salsa.
it was like unbelievably large. And I just remember looking there, I'm like, this is my table and section. What the fuck am I, like, what's going on? So I had to put on like the not the leather gloves, the plastic gloves. I grabbed like probably 30 paper towel or 30 like rags, and I'm just like
And how do you do
into
with
a
puke?
garbage.
Are you somebody who has like a bad stomach where if like you saw it, you'd be like,
Dude, it's so loud in there. There's like everyone's like drunk. Like I didn't even think. I was just like,
I
get
gotta,
this in
I gotta
here.
clean this up.
And as I'm cleaning it, the guy like taps my shoulder. He's just like, bro, I'm like, this guy's an asshole who puked. Like we're not even really his friend. Here you go. And he just stuffs like $100 bill in my pocket. And I was like, it's worth it.
Thank you.
It's worth it. It was also on the couch. So I'm like swiping through like the crack of the couch. Like, where like the pillows,
Ooh.
like there's like 3 pillows on a couch. In those 2 cracks in the middle, there was puke in there. So I'm like scooping with like it's just, sorry listeners. I know it's disgusting, but
This is so terribly off-brand, but it's a great. I mean, I could see why you have this contrast now.
that's what I dug through. Like it was terrible. Made a lot of money, but it was like, I'd wanted out almost.
There's a reason that you made a lot
of.
of money because there wasn't people just hopping at the door for this job.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
There were actually a lot of people hopping at the door. I'm like shitting on this job. Like it is actually really good if like you enjoy the late nights and like the cleaning up, but sometimes it can just get overwhelming and a bit
The
toxic.
puke cleanup, the
Yeah.
Molly made puke cleanup.
But seriously, I feel like not enough people work those shit jobs right away. It's usually the people with like more money and like privilege, I guess. But it's like working that shit job, you think it's wasting your time, but really it's not. It really makes you appreciate not just the fact that you can do better and do something bigger, but when you do something bigger and you hire someone, that person you hire is pretty much a grunt doing low level work. And when you were someone doing grunt low level work, you can then appreciate that other person 1-to-1 ratio, where you're not ever like not understanding why they don't get that thing done. Like you get it, like they're unmotivated. You need to figure out how you can motivate those people. You have to figure out like what they don't like about that job. How can you like switch their mindset? Like there's so much to hiring and working with people that I don't think you can learn unless you've been through it. And that's why every CEO is like, yeah, I used to mop the floor of the mailroom and now I'm at the top of the building. It's because like you know what goes through each step. Therefore you can then lead.
This is excellent. This is really good. Because I knew you worked at Citizen. I didn't know exactly how glamorous the work was, though. So, I mean, I think it's a great lesson that you can, you have to do the hard stuff sometimes. That like sometimes the root of burning all the bridges and like just doing what you love, whether it's creative work or, whatever it might be. Sometimes it actually doesn't set you up for success because you don't understand the hard work that has to go on behind the scenes. Because I'm sure when you started your video work and try to get that business off the ground, like it wasn't all sexy editing. Like and to your credit, I think one of the things that you do really well, if I look at all the skills and hats that you need to wear as a freelancer, at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about how like the creative is only maybe a third of that, maybe more, but there's this business hat, you have to work on the business and just not in the business. And what I mean by that is that like you're also in charge of marketing yourself. You're in charge of finding new leads. And one of the things, going back to what I was the point that I was originally going to make, is that one of the things that you do really well is that I think you're one of the best people that I know in terms of freelancers at managing the relationship that you have with clients. And that means getting on the calls and doing the invoices and doing all the sexy stuff that most creative people forget about or just want to hand off to somebody else.
Wait, the unsexy stuff.
The unsexy stuff, not
you said
the
sexy stuff. Definitely
the
not.
unsexy stuff. I misspoke. Yeah, the unsexy stuff. And even within the creative process, like it's different when you're a designer or a motion designer compared to a videographer, because I see you a bunch of the time, and I can think of specific times when we were in editing suites where like you were grinding away for an hour or two just like selecting clips, and like you would shoot maybe 30 gigabytes, if not more. I don't know what exactly it is. You might dummy me on a technicality, but you'd shoot a bunch of footage, and then you would have to find like the top 10% of that footage that's going to make it into the video. Mm-hmm. And that work, like that would kill me. I would be so bored doing that
It's
work.
terrible. It's really horrendous. Unless like the footage is like gorgeous and you're like,
Unless you're at
I
Lil
get to
Uzi
look-
Vert shooting a concert.
yeah, or like you're in Banff shooting like the scenery, like you'll want to select that. But if you're like just doing another event, you just want to kill yourself because you're like, oh my, not literally, guys, sorry, but you just, it's terrible. It's seriously terrible, and that's where delegation came into play. Pre-COVID,
Yeah.
I was starting to, there was people we knew at school.
Well, right before COVID.
Yeah, there's
You
people we
were
used
building
to.
you were scaling the business, and then COVID laughed. You planned, God laughs.
Yeah, exactly. But
I see ya.
honestly, I don't even think of the invoice stuff, the client phone calls, all that stuff or emails as unsexy work. I don't think it's sexy, but I don't think it's unsexy. I kind of enjoy it because there's a thrill I get personally, and I think this is just one of my strengths, to get a lead and then have that conversation of like selling to them and like talking to them, not selling to them, but like it's a sales call in a way.
Yeah.
And just having this like excitement of like, oh, we both have ideas, we both want to work with each other, we're both gonna like hopefully make our goal of money after this video comes out. And there's this feeling of like I guess like fervor, or like there's like energy in that call that excites me because I'm like, ooh, something new, a new adventure that we're going towards. It's like that just excites me. And then an invoice is like, I almost like sending it because like I also get to, obviously I'm getting my money, but I'm also saying like it was a pleasure working with you. Hopefully we can like work on more ideas in the future. Hope everything goes well. Let me know how the video does. Like I'm excited for you guys, and like I share their video on my social media. Like these are all things I like to do to just connect with the client, assuming the relationship was already like strong enough. So I like it, but I can see how people don't like it. Like I don't think you like it, that kind of stuff. Do you?
I mean, I know it does excite me in the same way that it excites you, for sure.
I wouldn't say
it's cool hearing.
It doesn't excite me, but it's like, or maybe it does. I don't know.
It's your passion. You have a passion for invoicing, and that's okay.
That's
like,
wow,
no judgment,
that's a bad
judgment-free
passion.
zone.
No, but here's another thing. Like I'm helping our friend McCann with stuff, and like I'm not doing anything super technical, but I'm like managing people and like talking to people, like making people's ideas clear and concise, and moderating like systems. Like I love doing that. And it's similar to invoicing or having these client phone calls. Like I almost like delegating and managing people more than I do actually like editing. I'm starting to
Really?
learn about, like, there's sometimes editing I like way better and it's less frustrating, but there is something nice. I think it's a skill of mine of just, or maybe I'm just completely not telling the truth right now, and you're like, this guy doesn't know anything about managing people, but I just feel like I
Wait, this guy's 23.
Yeah.
He's trying to sell me a course.
don't trust him.
I
But-
don't trust him.
It just feels natural to me. It feels good. So not everyone's like that, and I think you should delegate if you're not like that, because you're just going to burn out.
So you're saying if there's a creative, someone similar to me, where it's like you don't have no, well, I don't think I have no passion. I don't think that's true. But someone who doesn't, those skills and everything surrounding the creative doesn't come so easily. Mm-hmm. We had David Vahey on last episode, and he has, I mean, it was kind of a joke, but he has a manager. If you were somebody who is in that situation where you don't like the the business that surrounds the creative, would you recommend to that person to find a manager? And then I have some follow-ups on like working with a manager, because we've had this conversation before with not with a video person, but with a creator that you know, who somebody came in as a manager who was just like not who they said they were in the slightest. And so one of the things that I'm thinking about as I was asking the question, I know that I'm kind of going off on a trail here, is that like part of hiring the manager is making sure that it's a good fit and making sure that like this person's a high quality person. They're not just in there to like take advantage of you.
I'd say never have a manager unless you're so big. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, you can handle almost all this on your own. And I think if you're someone who is entrepreneurial in spirit, you don't need a manager. But if you're someone who's like not entrepreneurial in spirit, you can get a manager or just become an employee. Why do you have to be freelance entrepreneur? Why not just be an employee if you don't feel like you like business? Because if you're going to be a freelancer, you are pretty much an entrepreneur. And to get a manager, I just think doesn't make sense unless you're at a certain scale, a certain size. Because they're just taking a cut. They're doing what you could easily do in the DMs or whatever, or like setting up contracts. You can just find that on your own. And I think it's an asset to learn that stuff. Because then you can appreciate it more, and there's less likelihood of you getting screwed over. But I mean, what am I going to tell anyone? Oh, make sure your manager is someone you can trust. Like, I don't know. I never had a manager. I don't know how to answer that question.
Okay, so you have a really good. You kind of touched on this earlier with like you said earlier you enjoy sending invoices to client because A, you're making money, and B, you can kind of remind them that like you had this good time making work together. Let's put you in the situation. You have a great time with the client. You make some really good work. You want to keep working with them, but they haven't brought it up. It's kind of like hanging out in the air right now, whether or not you're going to have projects in the future. It's kind of like this indefinite thing. And you want to keep working with them. You like the work that you're doing together. What would that message look like in the client invoice or in your like kind of last sign-off email to them? Like how would you frame that, and kind of what would you say?
Well, it depends on like how our relationship has been throughout the experience. Because a lot of times I'll work with people.
Let's just, to simplify, let's assume that you have a good relationship and there's like good trust. Okay, there.
Good relationship. And then what I'm about to say a little different, because a lot of times I'm working with a client on a project and they have so many ideas on top of the idea we're executing that they're like, oh yeah, maybe later we're going to do this, or like this is coming up, or this and this. So I've kind of already established like our future while actually making one piece of content, depending on the relationship. So,
and just to cut in super quick, like, is this something that comes up? I think I already kind of know the answer, but is this something that comes up in the earlier calls, like maybe near the start, where they're like, we have 4 ideas, we're gonna do 4 different videos, and you have to kind of like walk them down, like, okay, the video, like doing one video is gonna cost, let's just simplify, $2,500. What's your budget like? They say, okay, let's just start with the one video. Is that kind of where, kind of early on in the engagement, where like, okay, they want to do more stuff, but right now we're just going to focus on the one video, and then kind of in the future those are kind of hanging in the air?
I'd say it's equally across the beginning, middle, and ending of the whole client experience with them. Like, some people say at the beginning, some people say in the middle, some people are saying it near the end, depending on how things are going. I wouldn't say there's one moment, but you explained one of them, and like to a T. But yeah, I think the way it ends is like, I'll bring up that it was great working with them on this stuff, and I say like, oh, the ideas you had prior were great as well. I think they could work in the future. I hope that we can maybe execute those in like the coming like weeks or months, and just have a nice day. And then I'll like follow up with them if they haven't got back to me. But also there's things like reposting or commenting on their videos just like keeps you in their head a bit, it's like, that sounds like manipulative, but it's also just like a good person thing to do. Why not support the client you made for? Because not only are you helping them, or people see, oh, there's credibility here, like there's people saying it was a pleasure working with them and that they're nice people who own this business. But on top of that, they're like, the clients think, oh wow, this person who not only just provided a service for me is then supporting me post-mortem or post release of whatever we made. So it's like that's what I enjoy, and that's where I think what the relationship should be like post video.
Yeah.
Like,
so it's
people
not
first.
Just
put the people
the sign
you work
off
with.
email. Not just the sign off email, hey thanks, see you later.
I always kind of like tee up a future. without being
And I
too
think,
like
would you
creepy.
say that it's the responsibility of you as the freelancer to kind of paint that picture?
Yes. Yes. If you say goodbye to your friend hanging out, this is obviously a little different, but whenever I see a friend and we go for a walk, comes over to my house or whatever it is, he's leaving, I dap him up, see you later. I always go like, yo, what are you saying next week? Like, what are we doing? Like, I always lead the end to like, what are we doing next? Like, why not do that with a client without obviously being silly and pushy? Be like, hopefully we can work again in the future. Or like, I see like I really like your vision. I really like what you're doing in the space you're in. Like, I'm sure we could work together and come up with some more ideas if you're interested in that. Like, I'm
That was
wishing all the
super
best.
solid. That was super solid because that's another step I don't think about, or I didn't think about before. And you've
Right.
fleshed out in plenty of detail, like what that could look like.
Because most people finish the interaction with the client and they go, I did my job.
Yeah. And that's a job well done. Like, you see the work, the client's happy, check mark, okay, moving on.
When it's not, that's not what it is. It's really an
Yeah.
ongoing.
Or you're just leaving value on the table that you could be working with this person in the future.
Yeah, and I wonder if those people who don't think about that are just naturally not entrepreneurial minded, which is not a shot, it's not a diss or anything. It's just some people aren't, and they should be employees, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And you'll do great.
And that there's just not a whole lot of education in the space, even for some people who came out of media school. There wasn't a dedicated freelancing class that kind of walked you through client experience, managing relationships, and all the business side of the creative. Yeah.
It's pretty much all just jobs.
Yeah.
You're an employee and whatnot.
Yeah. Which is why like something like The Future has reached 1 million followers on YouTube. They're on their way to helping 1 billion creative people in the world. It's just like a good signal that like there is just a complete lack of education in this space. And that like I think if I kind of zoom out just to get a little bit visy here, like if you zoom out, like there's going to be so much contract and freelance work in the future, especially with companies kind of transitioning that way, and they don't want to take a bet on somebody for a year when they could just onboard that person with one project to start, and if that goes really well, like they're just going to keep working with them. Which is part of the reason I think that we started this podcast. Like I want to learn from you, and I want to learn from all the people that we have on, and it's one of the things that I didn't mention when we did our year in review a couple weeks ago was that like that's been such a bright spot for me. And it's like we had talked about before that sometimes I'm similar to some of the guests that we've had on that say like I just want to do this by myself and I kind of want to figure it out, and I like being isolated and kind of trying to figure that out. But there's so much value to be gleaned from having people on and asking them questions, and for the most part, like everyone that's come on has been so eager to share what they know, which has been like it's been super, super awesome to see. So thanks to all of our guests so far. You've been awesome, and we can't wait to have more people like you in the future.
Except for, Kyle wasn't that good.
Kyle was garbage, and
much
Pigsy is still gassed up because his episode did the best for a while on YouTube, I think. But I told him that
That's true.
there were some other episodes that did better with Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
So yeah, suck on that.
Yeah.
Suck on that, Pigsy.
Yeah, suck
All
on
right,
that,
Mose,
Pigsy.
this was great. I gotta go, but usually I close off the show, and I'm kind of good at that now. I'm not trying to pump my own tires, but
You're the starter and the closer.
I'm usually the starter and the closer. I've
don't
got
get
good
paid
at it.
like
I
one,
want to
though.
hear Mose Desmoulin's take
My sign off?
on the sign off. You got to mention the social media. You got to mention we post on YouTube. Most people don't know that. And let everyone know what's going on.
Okay, I think from the start I should have done this because I have a voice of an angel. If you haven't noticed,
Yeah,
hopefully
face for radio.
hopefully in a week, I'm gonna have a pop filter so everyone complaining about me being a mouth breather doesn't have to listen to me. I think that'll improve listener experience. Like Will said, we're on social media. We post pretty much Monday through Friday on Instagram. I do a bunch of the carousel stuff. I think in the future, I'm going to try to do a better job of reaching out to past guests and other people that we have in our circles, figuring out what you guys want to see on there. So if you have any ideas, I want to take this time to say, like, just message us, like reach out. There's been people so far that have been so good about that, whether it's support or ideas or constructive feedback. Like, we want all of it. So make sure you're messaging us on social or just DMing us privately. Like, we just want to hear from you. Like Will said, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. Most people forget about the YouTube. I got buddies back in Thunder Bay that exclusively watch because they're looking for. They're actually. I had to pass this along. They're quite happy that we had a pre-recording shot, a stiff drink. They were happy about that. So shout out to that. I learned that from Thunder Bay, and that's pretty much all for this week, guys. We're recording podcasts Tuesday and Thursday next week, and we're going to be releasing 2. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And that's all from us. How was that? Was that all right? I think that was pretty good.
That was the longest close I've ever heard. People just want to get the episode done. We're going to get better at it, Mose. It's fine. Follow us on social, boys, and we'll be back next week. Let's go.
Ciao.